All right. Good morning. Buenos dias, Center for Spiritual Living, Palm Desert, and friends all over the planet. We are grateful to be back with you on another wonderful Tuesday morning here with my brother Jeffon Seeley. And it's another good day. It's a good day to be exploring as we continue to explore how to be an anti-racist, chapter 4. And I know Jeffon agrees with me whenever he pops up on the screen here that this information just continues to be richer and richer. Maybe not richer and richer, it's just also rich and full and beautiful. It's good. So again, I want to remind you that we absolutely welcome your questions, comments. I know Jeffon's got a couple of primers for us, a couple of questions for us to consider as we jump into our show here. Jeffon, are you there, my friend?
Yeah, can you see me?
Oh, there he is.
Ah,
He's there. He's there.
I was sitting in the ethers.
Good morning, my friend. How are you? How are you today?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. It's great to see you. As always, it's enjoyable. I really look forward to these conversations that we have each week. And I know we were chatting just before we jumped on, and I mean, we could spend so much time just going into one chapter but as we continue forward, I think we're just building on top of it, and the foundation is really being laid. So
yeah, maybe at some point when we get toward the end of the book, we could spend a couple of weeks going back and just kind of summarizing. After going through each chapter, we could go through and summarize a few parts of the book at a time and just kind of review some of it and see how it all fits together from a more global perspective, a whole book perspective. Could be something we jump into.
yeah, definitely. And as always, namaste to you. I'm grateful to be here. And as we know, there is a power and essence and energy that is everywhere present. It's enabling us to be, to move, to exist, to have our being. It's within each and every one of us. And may that continuously be magnified and recognized as we go through not only this conversation, but throughout this day, week, months ahead, and enjoying this experience called life.
Amen. I join with that. Beautiful prayer, my brother.
With that, we're done. No.
Have a good day, everybody. That's all we need to hear right there. If we could just practice that, we're in good shape, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. So let's see. Last week we had an opportunity to discuss, and can you see this screen here if I pull it up?
Yep, there it is.
So I know last week it was focused on this idea of power, and there were two comments that I received from Elizabeth there at the center from some individuals writing in. And I was thinking maybe we can just touch on this and then we can move forward. There was a comment early in the session about race assimilating into another race. Isn't that what we really want? Is for each other's race to be true to its customs, tradition, etc., without assimilation? Then of course, it follows that we love each other for our differences and our similarities. So that concept of assimilating really has caused me to do some reflecting on, and I know we talked about it last time, the ways in which in my mind just deeply ingrained to, if I want to make it, if I want to do this, if I want to do that, then how do I go about this whole process? What do I do? I don't know if I'm making sense, but I don't know if that was really a question or just a comment there. But assimilating.
Well, it's a power. Can you bring it back up, Jeffon? Would you mind?
Yeah, of course.
There was a comment early in the session about a race assimilating into another race. Isn't what we really want is for each other to be true to its customs, traditions, etc., without assimilation. Then, of course, it follows that we love each other for our differences and our similarities. Seems like a powerful idea. I mean, there's an idea about assimilation that we talked about where you actually lose some of that. It becomes, scrubbed away. I would, if it is a question, I would say, I would have a tendency to agree with this statement here. We want to be aware of even, and I love this week, Jeffon, how he talks about, we want to bring our attention not to like a skin color of a person necessarily, but an individuality of a person. Not to become colorblind, but to appreciate the differences and the similarities of the individual their particular personality and not group everybody together into a group.
Right, right. Yeah, so, from that point, hearing you read it, that makes total sense. I mean, yeah, we to honor and embrace and cherish our individuality, our uniqueness, and also allowing everybody else to do the same where we value and recognize. And I know in this particular chapter that biological anti-racism, where we see it as the genuine equality that flows through all of us, regardless of where we're from, our background, customs, cultures, ethnicity, any of those things. So I think that's a great lead in. But before we touch upon this fourth chapter, another resource that somebody shared, and I don't know if you've seen this, Rev Charles, the documentary entitled 13th.
I have not watched it yet. I'm familiar with it, but I've not watched it yet.
It is a really fascinating documentary. I would also recommend that.
Cool.
So with that being said, then chapter 3 is not biology, it's chapter 4.
We got the word right. We're
yeah,
right place,
yeah, we're that far. So this whole concept, biological racist, one who is expressing the idea that the races are meaningfully different in their biology, and that these differences create a hierarchy value of value, excuse me. And then anti-racist is obviously an individual who believes that we're the same in their biology and there are no genetic racial differences. This chapter really prompted me, and I'll share some of this as we move through, but it really prompted me to stop for a moment, reflect back on my life and some of these racial differences that I actually believe to be true, that I'll share a little bit. And it's I haven't thought about it since I was probably, elementary, maybe early middle school. It's fascinating how this conversation, this book is really, for myself, prompting and bringing out a lot of things that have just been tucked down deep into my mind and being. I don't know if that's the same for you.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's continuing to untangle assumptions or ways that that there's like agreement about certain things. Like, for example, on the bottom of page 49, some of these things, that inherently these are the certain traits that Black people have. These are certain traits that white people have. Mm-hmm. Physical attributes or intelligence quotients or things like that. Continuing to untangle those things, and of course, it's based on the whole idea of this, Human Genome Project, and we're going to get into that too.
Yes.
But I love how he just speaks directly to that, to the size of people's anatomy, to their intellectual capacity, to certain races are better athletes than others, all that kind of stuff. It really provides just a straight on opportunity to untangle these things, backed up by, again, not just opinion, but real information, facts.
Yeah, it's really, really fascinating.
Yeah.
So there's I'll start here with on page 44.
Yeah.
Generalizing the behavior of racist white individuals to all white people is as perilous as generalizing the individual faults of people of color to entire races. An anti-racist treats and remembers individuals as individuals, and it feels as if we are circling back to that conversation where we recognize the deficiencies in people instead of the deficiencies in policies. And then this kind of takes it even a step deeper. We suddenly don't just generalize an entire group of people because of how one person demonstrates, but we see them individually for how they are choosing to show up and how they appear in the world, which is a really great spiritual practice, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Being present with the one in front of you.
Yes.
And there's a wonderful dance too, Jeffon, I see between this idea, and I was attempting to speak to it maybe a little clumsily, but between this idea that you have on the screen right now and the idea that person wrote in on about celebrating our customs and traditions and things that groups of people do celebrate together, where it's a family unit or cultures of people, that when we're actually that we can do both, and that there's a wonderful dance between these two, that we do get together within community to celebrate the things that we celebrate over the course of a trip around the sun. But also when it comes to actually being an anti-racist, or, really practicing anti-racist principles, as Kenny, points them out here, that we're also called to be with a person individually, like you have on the screen here, to be with them. Oh, not all white people behave that way. Not all Chinese people behave that way. Whatever. Not all black, people of color.
Yeah.
So to really just, again, he just keeps calling us into a greater, more expanded awareness of all of it.
Right, right. And, I'll pause this very quickly, and I didn't put this on a slide, but I think it's important to state his example that he shared in this particular chapter about being in school and, his third grade and a few of the kids who were white were favored by the teacher at that time. And the way that the teacher just ignored one of the shy Black girls, and that demoralized her spirit in terms of willingness to share, and maybe a deeper even thing that occurred within her that he obviously can't write about because that's for her. But it was interesting. And then the way that certain children are disciplined differently. And then the study that he had, I believe this was from 2013, 2014, but what did it say? African-American children were roughly four
times as likely than white students to be suspended from public school.
Yes.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm just helping you out there.
Yeah, I needed that. Thank you.
I'm your hype man, brother. I'm your hype man.
So that was a really important point that I felt that just to think about, and then he eases into the concept of microaggressions, which, have you heard that term before prior to this, microaggressions?
I don't know that I have. I know that I haven't heard it in this context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He really goes into depth, which let me share the screen again.
Yep.
So microaggression here, the constant verbal and nonverbal abuse, racist white people. Now, we have to be aware. I'm just quoting his book. This is not me saying this, okay? I just want that to be out there. Unleash on Black people day after day. This is on page 46. I would highly recommend everybody look into this concept of microaggression, but I like how he takes it a step further. Now, some of these are a white woman grabs her purse when a Black person sits next to her. Has anybody ever done that? The seat next to a Black person or anybody stays empty on a crowded bus because of the thoughts, emotions, and feelings that you may have towards that person. Somebody calls the cops on the side of Black people barbecuing in the park. We've seen plenty of those things that have happened in the recent time where, affluent white folks are calling the police on even a young girl selling water in front of her apartment building, assuming that Black people are the help, assuming the help isn't brilliant, not giving the Black folks the benefit of the doubt. Ahmaud Arbery calling the cops on us for running down the street, getting shot because you are running down the street, and they categorize you as a burglar. Now, these are brief, everyday exchanges that send denigrating messages to certain individuals because of their group membership. And that is what he's encompassing here. Brief, everyday exchanges that maybe we are totally unconscious of. Maybe that's an implicit bias that we're unaware that we're unaware. But I want to move to the second slide, and then maybe we can park on this for a moment. He basically said that maybe these aren't microaggressions. Maybe this is actual abuse. A persistent daily hum of racist abuse is not minor, so it's not micro. If we think about the Grand Canyon, and even if there's one drop of water that is continuously falling on a particular place in a rock, that rock is going to eventually be eroded in a way where that drop can eventually fall through. It may take a long time, but that low hum, that persistent nature of that. So he uses the term abuse because an aggression is not an exacting term. What other people call racial microaggressions, he calls racist abuse, and only racists shy away from using the R word because racism is steeped in denial. This whole concept, I could really just park on And I don't know, it really opened a different door in my mind. I don't know if I'm just rambling on over here, but this is something
No,
that I think is extremely
no,
important.
we're with you, man. Go.
Yeah, yeah. So microaggressions, I think of this in my experience of individuals overlooking certain groups of people, teachers not even asking other certain people's opinions or perspectives, which suppresses the voice, which makes people feel as if their voice doesn't matter. People sitting in churches and people immediately going towards certain individuals and ignoring others. One thing that I've heard a lot with people who are people of color, primarily African-American people, in a call that we did with Science of Mind magazine, which was like elevating melanated voices on their Facebook channel, was this idea that many Black folks who enter into spiritual communities, they feel welcomed, but they don't feel as if they belong. And this is maybe something, and I'm not saying this is abuse in any form, but maybe there is just this level that we as individuals have to step towards in order to identify things that we may not know that we are doing, which can appear in a form of a microaggression or in a form of just simply dismissing, overlooking, or diminishing or discounting somebody's uniqueness that they are bringing to the table.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Amen. No, and it could be based on a person's skin color. It could be based on just what they're wearing,
Yeah.
how they look. It's neglect, or this is my comfort zone, and I don't want to have anything to do with what's outside of my comfort zone because then I'm going to be uncomfortable. Or then I might be confronted with something, and then generally when people get confronted with something, they can get defensive or angry or things like this. But yeah, it shows up in overt and subtle ways, and with the system, or with the kind of the programming that's taken place in some of these ways, whether it's somebody's skin color, the way they're dressed, whatever there is the foundation for the bias or the segregation.
Mm-hmm.
There's a programming that's taken place. So again, I use the word untangling. There has to be, and I think we've alluded to this, Jeffon, a conscious, really overt movement in the other direction, so that we can really untangle these things. And I love what he says here, that what the fallout of these types of behaviors are, whether you're conscious of it or not, and why he uses the word abuse: distress, anger, worry, depression, anxiety, pain, fatigue, suicide, and things all that come from being alienated or knowing that you are being abused in subtle or not so subtle ways. And I know that from having some physical abuse that I experienced in my life. Exactly these feelings that he's talking about.
Yeah.
I agree with him calling it abuse because of those words, those describers that he uses as far as feelings that come along with it.
Yeah. It's microaggressions in the diversity and inclusion realm with organizations is something that he mentioned is kind of re-emerging or has emerged. And I really like the concept of calling it what it is, which, whether racial abuse is done in a overt, hurtful, harmful way or very subtle in nature, it is abuse, and it continues to perpetuate that racial inequity, which are racist policies and racist ideas that create an uneven playing field for everybody. Yep. And so to really begin to call it out like that, it's like, you can't hide, there's no rock. And microaggression seems like, okay, well, I just won't be as aggressive next time. Or, okay, I'm sorry, it's small, it's very minute. But calling it for what it is, in my opinion, racist abuse, is really like, look, am I gonna be an abuser or am I not? And even in my perspective, like, am I gonna go this way or am I not going to go this way? No neutrality.
No neutrality.
No neutrality.
Looks like we've got a couple of comments, Jeffon. Let me just get to the comments here and see what we've got.
Okay.
Joyful Stranger says, also practice talents. Oh yeah, when we're talking about kind of the things we associate with various colors of people. Also, practice talents are natural. Firmness is anger, right? Referring to black folks. Outgoing person. Ignoring is also a form of microaggression or racial abuse. Yep. It's a way of closing people out from participating. Absolutely. And that's where that alienation comes into play, that otherness. You don't belong. And it creates all sorts of being cut off, because for the most of us as human beings, unless we really desire to live, like you said, you mentioned you took a trip, which is yours to talk about if you want to, but unless you desire to live out in the middle of nowhere, you're going to be interacting with people. And so, with so many people on the planet. And so we're called to a higher, not higher, just a more committed stance on breaking these things down and being committed to becoming anti-racist.
Yeah, yeah. And to kind of piggyback on outgoing persons, ignoring is also a form of microaggressions. In these inclusion programs that I'm doing, there are three aspects really that go into creating this equitable opportunity or employer supportive workplace, which is people feel valued for their unique perspective, feel wanted for their diverse membership, and feel respected in terms of human equality. And that idea of human equality then brings it back to that idea that there is nobody who is superior nor inferior to anybody, which we'll see as we continue through this chapter, that biological racism is not only recognizing the differences and saying that they are meaningful, but then creating a hierarchy of the superior, inferior based upon those differences that probably the more superior race, or who we believe or who they believe to be the more superior race, says that this is the right way. You guys are cursed, which I'll touch on that as well, because
Cool.
that was a deep story in my my upbringing.
Right on. Cool. Let's keep rolling, huh?
All right. But I really like that persistent daily low hum. I mean, I just think about the Grand Canyon.
Yep.
That was not a low hum. That was a roaring river. Anyway.
Hey, sometimes it's like that too, but that's not what he's talking about in this. But we see that happening also.
Yeah. So this is where we just basically were. Page 49, biological racism rests on not toe.
Idea.
I can't. Oh my gosh.
Hitch a ride. It's fine. Man.
Okay, you switch two little letters and suddenly it's a whole different meaning. But
I think we all get it.
So don't tow these ideas around. Detach them from the hitch, and we'll be good to go. So biological racism rests on these two ideas: that the races are meaningfully different in their biology, and that these differences create a hierarchy of value. I think this might be a good point for me to share this idea. So before I touch on this, let me stop sharing the screen and tell you, everybody, just a little bit of my experience, which some of you may know. I was raised in Salt Lake, and raised with my grandparents, as my father African-American, and I didn't really have a close relationship with him until I was about 16. My mother was around, but when I was about 9 or 10, she started slipping down that very slippery slope of addiction. And so while she was there, she wasn't really there. And she has now been clean and sober for 10 years, which is awesome. But it was a rough road growing up. And so because of that, I was raised with my grandparents, who my grandma was a part of the Mormon religion, my grandpa, passively. But I remember sitting in Sunday school one day, and the Mormon religion, and I guess we see the Bible too, it said, I remember specifically, my sister and I are the two only kids of color, and there was a little Sunday school lesson that says that those descendants of Cain were painted black because of their sins. Therefore, anybody with dark skin was not able to get into the highest kingdom of heaven in the Mormon religion, which is the celestial kingdom. So you have to be white, and you have to be a white man to get there. But they've, I guess God told him something different now. But I remember sitting there and thinking, here my sister and I'm 10 years old, my sister's 7, and they're basically telling me at a young age that I will never be worthy of being in this particular area. Now, I say that here with a little bit of a grain of salt, so to say, because that does not capture everybody in that religion. I cannot say that that's what everybody thinks, but I'm just simply saying that was the message that was passed down to me that I believed to be true until I was willing to question those particular ideas that were just being bombarded in my mind from primary to Sunday school to sacrament, all of those things. So when I saw this particular expression based upon Noah, and this is where Dr. Will would be incredible to share these type of ideas, you know?
Totally, I had the same thought. Yep.
But basically that Ham would be punished because he saw his father's nakedness. The other two sons walked in backwards and covered him up. And therefore, there's this individual, George Best, who was an English writer, who said that God willed that Ham's sons and all his posterior, I don't know if I said that right, after him should be so black and loathsome that it might remain a spectacle of disobedience to all the world. So
Right.
biological racism or racial difference could be created by misreading the Bible. And that is what I mean, the Bible was weaponized in terms of slavery, in terms of colonizing the Americas. So I was just in South Dakota with my wife. Her sister had a baby shower, so we were there. And just thinking about the quality of life on the reservations, we were driving and I was looking at this lake and I was like, was this a man-made lake? And obviously in those areas, they made a lot of man-made lakes. And the reason they did that is because that was a sacred site for the Native Americans, the Yankton Sioux in that area, and they displaced them. So how do you think that you can displace an entire group of people if you just dam up the river and create a lake over it? They're never going to go back. The same was true in North Dakota with the Arikara tribe up there, Fort Berthold area. There is a huge lake that they created, Lake Sacagawea, I believe is what they call it. And that was another sacred site. And they dammed up that river, created a huge lake, and then displaced them. And so I'm saying all of this because weaponizing a religion and calling everybody who does not fall on their knees to that religion a savage, and then creates a mindset where you can either enslave them, you can make them go extinct, or you can basically try to assimilate them. If they're not going to assimilate, you know what happens. You're going to be punished. It's a very, very deep wound that America has that I would love to see more attention and awareness brought to in schools from a very young age, where we recognize that it's not all pixie dust and fairy tales.
And it isn't. And I wasn't aware of that. Thank you for sharing that. And it makes a lot of sense about damming the rivers. The cover up could be, let's create some hydroelectricity or maybe that too, but also this whole other piece.
Right.
That's fascinating. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Bible's been used to abuse people based on race, based on all sorts of stuff for a long time. I mean, talk about weaponizing. How much the Bible's also used for a tremendous amount of good, but it's also been used for a tremendous amount of shame and punishment, like you're saying. And what you're saying, may a curse be put on Canaan. Black and loathsome, that it might remain a spectacle of disobedience to the whole world. I mean, whenever I read something and it's saying something about me, or when it like hits right here, like if to change the word to, if it was just as a Black person reading something like that, how could it not? I mean, that's kind of a macro aggression, if you will, or the abusiveness of it. How could that not generate? What was it? What page were we on? Oh, distress, anger, worry, depression, anxiety, pain, fatigue, and suicide.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
You know what's fascinating is I often tell I have great friends who are still part of the Mormon religion. I think I mentioned to you, Rev Charles, that my little sister is. And so there is no need for me to run around the mountain, as one of the Upanishads says, circle around the mountain yelling at everybody that their path is wrong, when there are many ways to go up to the peak. Yes. And so I can honor, cherish, and respect everybody's particular path that they are choosing to follow. But one of my some of my friends who are still in the Mormon tradition, I was asking them about this whole thing that I mentioned to you just barely about, people being painted black because of their sins. And then I asked them, has there ever been a painting in any of the churches where somebody is black, dark skin or black?
In any of the Mormon churches?
Any of the Mormon churches. Any depiction of Jesus beside this like blue-eyed individual, very airy, flowing
Yep.
hair.
We've all seen it.
And so, and I'm like, if you ever see a picture, please send it to me. I mean, and that's the same with a lot of other churches too. I remember going to Martin Luther King's church that he was preaching in Atlanta, and right over the pulpit was a depiction of, it wasn't a black Jesus, it was a white Jesus in a Baptist church. And I'm not here to say that it has to be one race or another. I'm just simply saying that there should be equitable representation, even in church settings. The texts that we read, the stories that we tell, all of those things. So anyways, I'm kind of going off this.
No, we're there. I love it. I mean, I think that well, what hasn't happened for so long, we're talking so much more about equity, is there hasn't been equity for so long. So that's what I hear when you bring up a point like that, Jeffon, is that we need to put a particular emphasis on making the system equitable. So, and that takes, it takes concentrated effort and attention in order to do that, and a consciousness around it. And so, anyway, I just say all that to agree. Maybe I'm the one mumbling this morning.
Well, and I think it's important to recognize that equity cannot exist without first a culture shift. There has to be a transformation in culture. Otherwise, we can say, oh, give everybody an opportunity, and it will maybe happen for a year or so, and then we'll go back to the same way it was, because there's been no fundamental shift internally that opens the door to be able to hold that equity that we're aiming to achieve. Exactly.
Which in turn grows a particular consciousness, a system does.
Yes.
A couple comments here, Jeffon. Adair says, I think Adair's got a question. How do we distinguish between the microaggressions based on race and those based on other factors like weight, size, appearances of all kinds? Do you want to address that, Jeffon?
I will try my best there. I would say that microaggressions based on race tend to fuel the racial inequities that racism produces. Racist policies and racist ideas that keeps that superior, inferior in place. Other factors, while they are important, weight, size, appearances, sexual orientation, gender identification, all of those things, while they may create a limiting experience, I would dare to say that in an uneven playing field, you can't act as if that it doesn't do anything. I think that the heart of these microaggressions that he's at least talking about are those that continue to perpetuate the racial inequality that we have seen since the inception of this country. And I often say, my friends who are LGBTQ and of white or Caucasian or white, I often ask them, well, if you go to a certain place, I'm not going to say that, because me and Dr. Joe had a conversation, and yes, people are treated totally different, but it's on a different level than the color of your skin. And I can't speak to that because have not walked down that path, so I can't get into something that I don't know anything.
Which path are you, being LGBTQ?
Yeah, I can't talk about the inequities that they experience because I know it's real. Especially my transgender friends, I know that what they experience is extremely real, and I can't act as if that it's not. But I can only speak, I guess, at this moment around the particular aggressions as it relates to racial inequality, but I'm not going to dismiss, discount, or act as if those other aggressions do not exist based on those other factors.
Yeah, amen.
Maybe that's a diplomatic way of saying that I don't know how to answer that.
Well, it's certainly well articulated. One more thing, my brother, let's see here, that's come up. Oh, maybe two things. Let's see. Outgoing person. Oh, at Adair, outgoing person is because skin color is first and foremost obvious difference that people notice. I guess that skin color is the first and strongest microaggression, but we can also guess that the other factors are add-ons. So microaggression because you're black, plus if you're overweight, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Thanks, outgoing person. Outgoing person also says, heard this week, blacks have had to fight so hard for equality, they have not been able to accomplish equity.
Yeah. So in our workshops that we do, we have these 3 boxes. The first box is centered around mindset, beliefs, attitudes, perspectives. The second box is the behaviors that show up. And then the final box are the results that we experience. And equality is in that first box. It has to be gained internally. We cannot wait for another person to grant us equality, though that would be a beautiful thing. But if we are willing to stand up and say that I am inherently worthy simply by virtue of being able to walk on this planet, I'm filled with just as much life, energy, vitality as anybody else, that then opens the doorway for us to at least maybe stand upon this platform of equality inwardly. Equity, on the other hand, depending on where we're at, if we're working in organizations where equitable opportunity is not there, if we are dependent upon another individual for a paycheck or in order to buy this piece of property or whatever the case may be, then we start getting into a variety of factors that are based upon the external world. And equity is what we see out here. But I would dare to say that equity will never be able to be accomplished fully unless all human beings are able to adapt or shift or expand or ascend in consciousness to one that is based on compatibility instead of survival.
Mm.
And anyways, yeah, we could.
Amen.
But yeah, I mean, we see African Americans or people of all different shades, colors, backgrounds who had to stand up and first recognize their inherent equality in order to step forward and be empowered in the work that they do. A lot of those individuals were obviously assassinated because that was not seen as something that they should be doing at that time. But it's available for all of us to capture that inherent equality and then step forward and let our light shine in the unique ways that we're here to do.
Amen. Amen. You want to keep going? Do you have some more slides to keep going through the chapter here, my friend? Or where
I've got about 20 more now.
What do we have?
I have a few more.
What's that? What'd you say?
Yep, I have a few more.
Okay. Yeah, we got about 20 minutes.
Okay, I think I have only 4 more slides here. So
okay.
According to he kind of gets into this idea then, okay, well, if there's this natural selection, the social Darwinist, I believe is how you pronounce it, the white race was winning the struggle and evolving, and the only 3 outcomes available for the weaker races were then extinction, slavery, or assimilation. And I kind of touched upon that on page 51. But there was a fascinating standpoint or expression that came in Bill Clinton's presidency, where he said the whole Human Genome Project.
Yep.
Basically, that in genetic terms, all human beings, regardless of race, are more than 99.9% the same. And that is the most important fact of life on this earth, is our common humanity. And Rev Charles, this is where I really had to stop for a moment and reflect. I mean, this is the concept of science of mind. This is the concept of recognizing the commonality, the golden thread, so to say, that runs through all of us, through all things. And it really begins to encourage us to step into this higher realm of consciousness, where we can honor and recognize the differences that exist, but not allow those differences to create barriers that prevent equality or equity from being a reality for us all.
Yeah, I love what Ernest Holmes says too, that we're separated but not separate. That we're out here doing our thing, and that just, I mean, just to meditate on that, this paragraph, page 52, just to more than 99.9%, right?
Yeah.
Just to meditate on that. I mean, it really does, and he even alludes to it in here. It's what that science, and I think we know this now, and especially over the last probably 30 years or so, science is beginning to prove what a number of aspects in philosophy and religion have known for so long, intuitively.
Mm-hmm.
That there is, you know, not what do I want to call it? The real religion and philosophy, the ones that weren't tainted or somehow perpetuating or preaching a dogma of otherness and separation, but rather that we are all one, that we're one expressing as many, and just to be with that, and how that, just this bit of information right here can change the course of how we view all of life.
Yeah.
What does he go on to say? And you might have a slide on this, Jeffon. He goes on to say something that the whole idea of skin color is a mirage that we've chosen to participate with.
Yes. Yes. And to your point on page 52, he said, what that means is that modern science has confirmed what we first learned from ancient faiths.
There it is. Yep.
Yeah. That is, yeah, it's fantastic to match those up.
The most important, again, yeah, bottom of page 52, the most important fact of life on this earth is our common humanity. There it is right there. Boom.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
What does he say? There's only one race, right? Which race? The human race.
Human race. Which then he touches upon, and it might be in the next slide here, but he said the single race makers push for the end of categorizing and identifying by race. But the unfortunate truth is that their well-meaning post-racial strategy makes no sense in our racist world, because racial categories create that racial inequity, which then fuel racist policies. And we see that they are all linked together.
Yep.
So, but I would dare to say there is a consciousness that humanity can reach where we begin to recognize the human race by way of that first question that we started off with, where we can honor and respect the culture, customs, traditions, backgrounds that individuals show up with, where we can honor the differences that exist between us while still honoring and cherishing the common thread of humanity that we share with one another.
It's a dance. It's that dance. It's all of it. It's not just this or that or black and white thinking that we can get into, so to speak. It's all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the last slide, and then we can kind of touch upon this here. So connecting, and this is, I went back one page here. So this connecting biology to the behavior as a cradle of biological racism leads to biological ranking of the races and the supposition that the biology of certain races yields superior behavioral traits like intelligence. I always thought for some reason that the most intelligent people growing up did not look like me. And that's another thing that I could go in and do some inner work around why that was the case. Segregationists, as he mentioned, look at the 0.1% for racial distinction. Assimilations ask, what should we be teaching in the walls of our churches and beyond the four walls that we find ourselves in? Which is fascinating. And then he touches upon, obviously, the anti-racist ideas, which I don't know if I have a slide for at this time, actually.
To the point of that slide right there, Jeffon, if I may, real quick.
Yes.
So he wraps that up by saying, and this is on page 54, that you have that mark there, at the end of the third paragraph. So if we cannot change racist policies and racist powers, final solution will be achieved. A world of inequity none of us can see, let alone resist.
Yeah.
Terminating racial categories is potentially the last, not the first step in the anti-racist struggle. And I think you alluded to that as well.
Yeah.
That we have to embrace and see this in order to march down what these last things you say are: racial categories, racial inequity, racial policies, all linked together. In order to, and even, when I talk with Dr. Will, and I think there's a tremendous amount of agreement about this, across the board, is that we've got to ink new laws, change policies, but we have to have our eyes wide open in order to do that. And I think that's what he's alluding to here. Yeah.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think I do have one last slide.
Oh, cool. Okay.
There it is. Yes, I was looking for this.
There it is.
There it is. Because then it comes down to, okay, well, what do we do? To be biological anti-racist is to recognize not the reality of biological equality, that skin color is as meaningless to our underlying humanity as the clothes we wear over our skin. To be anti-racist is to also recognize the living, breathing reality of this racial mirage, that was your point there, Rev Charles, which makes our skin colors more meaningful than our individuality. To be anti-racist is to focus on ending the racism that shapes the mirages, not to ignore the mirages that shape people's lives. I felt that is an important way to kind of conclude this particular chapter with, okay, we have that idea as to what biological racism is. Now we see the anti-racist ideas, and how can we go about to deconstruct that which exists first within ourselves? If we can't do that, I mean, it's going to be hard to shift anything.
Yeah, amen. Well, that's that last line there. It's just a statement about consciousness and how consciousness is cause. And I think that's just a different way of saying it. It occurs to me that's a different way of saying that, right? To be anti-racist is to focus on ending the racism that shapes the mirages. So we only see things that we've conceived of in consciousness. So again, I mean, to your point too, is what are we conceiving of in consciousness as it has to do with race, equity, inequity, all of these things? Go into the laboratory of prayer, reflection, meditation, and begin to reform, reshape, create new mirages, if you will. I mean, looking at it really from a holy spiritual standpoint, this entire life is a mirage, right? A dream we're dreaming as a human being. Not to ignore the mirages that shape people's lives. So again, back to consciousness, working with people in consciousness. What are we seeing is based on what we're believing, right? Believing is seeing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the greatest work that we do is the work that nobody sees, and it's the work that takes place within, and our willingness to have these conversations that may be somewhat difficult, or maybe that we just simply haven't recognized or spent time really diving into, and then having these conversations out in the open, which I would want to ask everybody who is chiming in here.
Sorry about that. I
was looking to the light.
I'm flying. That's our charge for everybody. Look to the light's inside of you, my brother. The light's inside.
Yeah. But if there's ways that we could make this conversation, I know I love it. I love having these conversations with you. But if there's ways that anybody who is tuning in feels that we can make it more interactive, more engaging, more impactful, please feel free to share. And if you have questions or things that you would like us to park on, even in the next chapter that we're going to read, please share those as well, because we really feed off of you just as much as, Rev Charles, I feed off of the conversation that we're having as well. Yeah,
I love that. I love interaction. I mean, and then we get to experience everybody's flavor and the spice. Did another comment just pop up there? Do you see it, Jeffon?
Yeah, who redesigns the Matrix?
The architect, of course. Have you seen The Matrix?
I have, but I haven't seen it for a while. I need to revisit it.
Who redesigns the Matrix? The only answer I can come down to is our individual consciousness. Within an infinite one, we have the absolute utmost freedom to create. And so the Matrix really is simply your choice within it. I believe that in this life, in this way, outside of the metaphor that they used and the story that they used, that we get to see what we want to see and choose to see. There are a lot more comments pouring in now,
huh? Okay. In the Matrix, one thing that I want to touch on is recognizing the illusions that we are continuously participating in, and whether those illusions actually are creating the real shift that we're aiming to achieve, or if we're just going through this life unaware that we're walking down particular paths. Knowing, though, that there is something that is flowing through us, enabling even to walk, which means every path that we walk, whether it's an illusion or not, is actually the path we're meant to be on.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. Let's see what else popped up there. Can you see it?
Yep. So outgoing person said, look for uncomfortable conversations with the Black man on YouTube, a series of videos that parallels our conversation. I've seen a few of those. I enjoy them.
I'll go check it out. I haven't seen them. Cool. What's it called? Uncomfortable Conversations?
And another one said, I think it's important. Uncomfortable conversations with a Black man. And Rev Charles, don't forget to write down that 13th documentary. I think that is a really, really great one. It kind of mirrors the book, The New Jim Crow.
The book, what?
The New Jim Crow.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yep. And Joyful Stranger said, I think it's important to realize to stop using racial categories, then we will not be able to identify racial inequities, on page 54. Yeah, and he's said a handful of times throughout this book so far that color blindness does not actually lead to anti-racist behaviors that can create a shift in policies that actually open the door to more equality and equity. And so I think that it's easy to take a colorblind approach or stop using racial categories as a sense of more comfort for the individual who is scared to tread on those slippery paths in their mind or outside of their realm of comfort, than it is to actually recognize the tendencies that one may have participated in, whether consciously or unconsciously, that has continued to perpetuate the inequities that we are talking about in terms of race.
Yeah, right on. Right on. I'd like to, I see another comment's going to come in, but I'd love to, the end of his personal story is kind of triumphant to me. And I just wanted to speak to that a little bit, that when he staged to sit in, because he didn't like, how he was being treated, how the teacher was treating the kids in the classroom. So he staged to sit in, and just how he talks about that. And if you've read the chapter, how that goes. But I love, when he got home, he thought, he's going to be punished or something. And his mom simply said, if you're going to protest, then you're going to have to deal with the consequences. That he was moved. And then he said, okay. And there were no consequences that time. And the teacher eased up on the non-white students, is what he says. And what's interesting is that he can't remember her name, the teacher's name. He doesn't remember her name. He remembers the experience. And he remembers that the teacher eased up on the non-white students. So and I'm just saying from his standpoint, what a triumphant experience that must have been for him in third grade, to actually stage his third grade sit-in, deal with whatever feelings he was having in the midst of that, all sorts of stuff, I would imagine. Mm-hmm. And then to notice that there were no long-term consequences in that moment, even though his mom gave him sage advice, and that the teacher eased up on the non-white students.
Yeah.
He achieved what he set out to do. I just think it's a beautiful story.
Yeah. That was I like how he's weaving his personal story through it as well.
Yeah, it's good.
So a few other things popped up here. Can we set this up as an interactive Zoom meeting? Perhaps maybe sometime we could do that, where we could even have little breakout sessions and have little groups go out, and we could create a larger conversation. I would be more than open to that. Yeah. Dr. Maureen Hoyt said, I'd like to see a discussion with a third person, an elder, Black, brown person, to see what an older person might suggest as a solution to racism. That would be fascinating.
Will you say that again, Jeffon?
Yeah, I would like to see a discussion with a third person, an elder, Black, or brown person, to see what an older person might suggest as a solution to racism. Joyful Stranger said, it's the first step of these three you mentioned: recognize, end the mirage, and reform policies. And then also consider making this a meeting and allow those attending to come on camera to be involved in the conversation. That would be awesome.
Yeah. And I know Jeff could set us up, via Zoom with that. so that we all can see each other, however that, is set up. But let's explore that. What would you think? And let's consider someone that we want to, I know we're moving through the book, and it would certainly to cover the material in the book and inviting a third person in. I don't know how we do that. Maybe we do it at the end of the book. Jeff saying, Jeff can make this happen. Maybe that's not even Jeff. Jeff's a legend.
Yeah.
Legendary Jeff. Jeff can make anything happen. I keep saying that, and he keeps being afraid when I say that, but
Jeff is so legendary, he doesn't even have to type his own comments.
That's right. But we could think about who, and there's no script here, Jeffon. We don't have to go through chapter by chapter every single week. If we want to talk about a third person that we want to bring in, let's do it.
Yeah.
And if we push the chapters out a week, then so be it.
Yeah.
We can explore that.
Yeah, I would like that. The cool one said, the child taught the adult. It happens all the time. And let's not change the format until we finish the book. Jeffon's slides are really helpful to the underlying main points. Perhaps that's what we could do. Maybe we can go through this conversation with everybody. And then at the end of it, let me reach out to some people, and maybe we could have a forum, a few of us. And I would love to have a woman's perspective as well. Maybe even an LGBTQ, a person of color, and then an elder person. And I think that would be incredible to hear the various things. I mean, this might be like a 4-hour town hall, but
it might, but worth the 4 hours. Could be 4 hours well spent. Did something else pop up there?
Yeah. Would you consider a second day that has the open conversations? So I think that was the idea with go through the book now and then have a later conversation that's open to everybody.
Yeah.
I'm open either way.
Yeah, we'll talk about, we'll take all of these things under advisement, gang, because we're considering our overall calendar and how we do things and stuff like that. These are all brilliant ideas. We just need to bring them in, kind of massage them a little bit, metabolize them, and see what's best for our overall calendar and how we can make that work going forward. So it's meaningful. So we're not oversaturating with anything. But I mean, this is certainly, it's as far as worthy conversations go, it's definitely right at the top of the pile. There's no doubt about it.
So
the pile, find the ponies.
So next week, chapter 5 for everybody. And if you have yet to receive the book or grab it, it's How to Be an Anti-Racist.
Ethnicity, chapter 5. Right on, my brother. Anything else you want to say to?
As always, I just appreciate everybody. I appreciate you, the center. If you all have questions or anything, please email them to info@cslpalmdesert.org. And all of you who are tuning in and have shared things in the past with how much you've enjoyed it or things that we could do to make it better, I'm very appreciative. I cannot sit up here and act as if I know everything, because I don't. So even just opening the door to allow these discussions, I really, really appreciate that. And you, Rev Charles, for your willingness, and Jeff behind the scenes for helping make all this possible. I appreciate all of you. So
thank you, my friend. And yeah, I echo all of that gratitude. And one of the things I'm really grateful for, Jeffon, is I come away with a new insight every time out of our conversation and the comments from the folks that weigh in. It's a wonderful and humbling place to be, presenting the information, but also having my heart open to be willing to continue to examine and explore, so that I can become a better human being, so that I can become just better as a human, create a bigger one global heart. So, amen. I appreciate you. Thank you, as always, for your time, for your love, for your attention, for putting those slides together. Helps form our conversation, and very grateful for it. So thank you, my friend, very much.
Thank you.
Right on. Couple quick announcements. Let's see, tomorrow we've got the Sensational Six. We have Thursday, I'm with Reverend Cheryl Guess, another one of our new ministers, Reverend Cheryl Guess. That'll be fun to get to know her better. So be sure and tune in and weigh in. We're going to get to know what she's up to, where she comes from, who she is, and how she's going to be serving the center. Again, with that whole series is designed to get to know our new ministers better and how they're going to serve the center, and just create a greater level of intimacy and knowing. Saturday, our regular Saturday meditation will be showing up in your inbox, your email inbox. If you're not on our email list, I certainly encourage you to be. You can go to the website and sign up through there, or just send an email to info@cslpalmdesert.org, as Jeffon already mentioned, or give a call into the center. And then Sunday, we've got another beautiful service for you that we will also be showing up in your inbox at 6 a.m. on Sunday morning. And then we roll into another week of what we've got. But what we're doing is doing our best today. And here's my charge to you, Jeffon, if you want to add to this, everybody, that we do our best to take some sort of information from this chapter, now that we've talked about it, whether it's the idea of microaggression, racial abuse, something like that, and just be really mindful of your interactions with people. Be mindful, be in the moment of where you're coming from. And if you're being motivated by some idea that you've learned that then translates into either racial abuse or microaggression. But he does conclude in here that he calls it racial abuse now. So just let's all be very mindful this week of how we're showing up, and to be willing to step out of our comfort zone and see that there's a tremendous beauty there, and that we do create one big fat global heart when we're willing to grow.
Yeah, that's great. And remember, micro or racial abuse isn't just physical things that you do. It's also thoughts that you send towards an individual that are not the highest in nature. So you can always catch yourself, stand guard at the doorway of your conscious mind, and be aware of the ways in which you are showing up and sending thoughts towards every human being that you have the opportunity to look at, to stand aside, to talk to, or even think about.
Yes. Let's see. Thank you, Reverend Charles Jeffon, outgoing person and joyful stranger. And Karen Grace says, I can be involved as an older Black female. Thank you, Karen, for being willing. Lovely. Thank you. We will definitely keep that in mind. Absolutely. Thank you for volunteering your willingness. Cool. Okie doke. That's what we've got. Anything else, Jeffon? Are we good?
That's it. Namaste to everybody. Have a beautiful day.
Let's love everybody. Make it the best day ever. Peace.